Sleep tight. Don't let the shadows bite. Claire had always been a skeptic, raised in a small town. She grew up in her grandmother's farmhouse, surrounded by old stories, mysterious whispers, and the fear of things that go bump in the night. Her grandmother, in particular, had a way of talking about the shadows that made Claire uneasy. She'd say things like, "Sleep tight, don't let the shadows bite," but Claire always chalked it up to childhood superstition. After all, shadows were just shadows, right? But tonight was different. The house was unusually quiet. Too quiet. It was late, far later than Claire would normally stay up, but tonight she couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, and the wooden walls of the old farmhouse creaked and groaned as though they were alive. The shadows in her room seemed longer than usual, twisting like dark snakes along the walls. Then the whisper came. "Sleep tight, Claire." It was faint, barely audible over the wind, but it sent a chill through her bones. Claire sat up in bed, her heart racing. She looked around, half expecting someone to be standing in the doorway, but there was no one. The room was empty. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. It was then that she noticed the shadows, more precisely, the movement within them. For the first time, she felt that there was something wrong with the house. The shadows were alive, and they were coming for her. As Claire lay in bed, paralyzed with fear, she watched in horror as the shadows shifted again. They seemed to pulse, almost like they were breathing, creeping closer to her with each passing second. She tried to tell herself it was just her imagination, her mind playing tricks on her. But as she stared at the corner of the room, she saw the shadows forming something, a shape, a face. Her grandmother's warning flashed in her mind again. Don't let the shadows bite. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what the warning meant, but she could feel it. Whatever this was, it was something ancient and malevolent. The shape in the shadows seemed to smile, its jagged teeth glinting in the faint moonlight that filtered through the curtains. Claire's heart raced as the figure leaned closer, its mouth whispering her name. Claire. Frozen with fear, Claire could hardly breathe. The air in the room grew thick and suffocating, as if the shadows themselves were closing in. And then, just as quickly as they appeared, they vanished. The room returned to its quiet stillness. But Claire knew that it wasn't over. The next morning, Claire tried to push the terrifying events from the night before out of her mind. She couldn't deny what had happened, but she didn't want to believe it either. The shadows were just an illusion, a figment of her imagination, she told herself. But when she went downstairs to talk to her grandmother, she noticed something strange. Her grandmother, who had always been a strong, wise woman, seemed different today. Her eyes were distant, haunted, as if she was trying to hide something. She was muttering to herself, whispering the same words Claire had heard the night before. "Sleep tight. Don't let the shadows bite." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She needed to know what was going on. She asked her grandmother about the shadows, but the old woman just stared at her with a mixture of fear and sadness. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she spoke. "You've seen them, haven't you?" her grandmother whispered, her voice trembling. "The shadows aren't just shadows. There's something far worse, and they're hungry." Her grandmother began to tell Claire a story she had never heard before. It was about an ancient curse, a curse that had been passed down through generations in their family. It was said that, many years ago, an ancestor had made a pact with a dark entity that lived in the shadows. In exchange for power, the family had agreed to serve this being. But over time, the entity grew stronger, and the price of the pact became steeper. Now, the shadows were alive, feeding on fear, waiting for the perfect moment to claim their next victim. Claire was a descendant of that cursed bloodline, and she had unknowingly inherited the ability to see the shadows for what they truly were. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire cried. "Why didn't you warn me?" Her grandmother looked away, guilt and fear in her eyes. "I tried, but some things are better left hidden. You're the only one who can stop it, Claire. But it won't be easy. You'll have to face the shadows and destroy them before they consume you. As Claire set out to unravel the curse, she learned that the shadows were not just dark shapes. They were creatures, entities that thrived on fear and darkness. They could slip in and out of the physical world, taking whatever form they wished. They were ancient, and their hunger was insatiable. Claire found herself in a race against time, learning more about the creature that had cursed her family. She uncovered old journals, hidden symbols, and long-forgotten rituals. But with each passing day, the shadows grew stronger, and Claire could feel them watching her. It wasn't just a house anymore. The shadows were everywhere, in the corners of rooms, in the reflections of mirrors, in the very air she breathed. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. As Claire pieced together the final pieces of the puzzle, she realized the only way to defeat the shadows was to confront the entity that controlled them. She had to go back to the place where the curse had begun, the old farmhouse, the place where her ancestor had made the pact all those years ago. With no choice left, Claire prepared herself for the final confrontation. The shadows seemed to sense her resolve, and they gathered, their whispers growing louder, their presence heavier. She could feel the weight of their hunger as they closed in around her. In the darkness of the house, Claire confronted the entity that had cursed her family. It was more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. A massive, formless shape, blacker than the darkest night, with eyes that burned with malevolent fire. "You cannot escape me, child," the entity hissed, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "I am the darkness. I am the shadows. And now, you will join me." But Claire refused to give in. She reached deep within herself, gathering all the strength and courage she could muster. She recited the ritual she had learned, using the words her grandmother had taught her, the very words that would sever the entity's hold on the shadows. As Claire thought she had won, she realized the horrible truth. The shadows had never been the real enemy. The entity had been using her grandmother as a vessel, feeding off her fear and despair for years. Her grandmother had been trying to protect Claire by keeping her in the dark, but it was too late. In a shocking twist, Claire was forced to make the ultimate sacrifice. She had to become the new vessel for the entity, or else it would continue to terrorize her family for generations. The shadows would bite again and again until no one was left. If you want to hear more terrifying tales like this, subscribe to Terrifying Tales of America. But be warned, once you enter the world of shadows, there's no escaping what lurks within.